And we know that Michelangelo spent quite a lot of time looking at these sculptures in the...
The Apollo Belvedere was one of a number of classical sculptures collected and brought to the Vatican by Julius II.
Julius brought many statues to the Vatican, and in this courtyard he built a sort of a theatre where these statues took up a role. They played Cleopatra, they played basically Virgil's Aeneid, and gave a kind of justification of the papacy. And artists came to the courtyard, they drew, and they transformed the statues in their drawings, they interpreted them. And there are these famous drawings by Michelangelo where the statue is actually put in motion, where he tried out what would happen if you make this movement more intense. He's just interested in what the sculpture means and expressing this in a different medium.
His knowledge of the human body is just staggering. His anatomical knowledge is amazing. The marks that he's making are sculptural, very chisel-like, lots of repeated strokes, as though he's moving over the body with a chisel, and not just with a chisel. I would say that he really likes these bodies, and they kind of set the ideal for future bodybuilders. That's sort of what they're aiming at, is what Michelangelo hopefully knew rather than imagined.
Michelangelo had boundless admiration for the great sculptors of antiquity, but he was always keen to show that he could outdo them. And in 1501 he was given a chance to do just that. He was called back to Florence to work on a huge block of marble that had lain abandoned for over 40 years. It was to become the celebrated David, carved in the astonishingly short space of less than 2 years.
At just over 4 meters, that's 13 feet high, the figure of David was the first colossal marble sculpture to be carved in Italy since antiquity. It was immediately hailed as a masterpiece. Of course, this is now a copy, and the original is safely housed in a museum a few streets away. It was decided to position the Gigante, as the marble was popularly called, here, outside the Palazzo della Signoria, the seat of Florentine government. Florence had become republican once more after the Medici had been hounded from the city some years before. The young biblical hero's calm resolution in the face of the threat of his gigantic opponent Goliath was an inspirational symbol of the Republic's determination to resist the return of the Medici, who had dominated the city for so many years. The heady experience of living in a young republic marked Michelangelo's political sympathies for life.
Michelangelo appears to have been completely committed to the ideals of the new Florentine Republic. And for the council chamber of the Palazzo della Signoria, he agreed to paint a grand mural celebrating a famous victory of Florentine citizen soldiers over the neighbouring city of Pisa.
Michelangelo started with a drawing. It's now lost, but it was copied in oil by Bastiano da San Gallo, and it's known as the Bathers, because it shows the Florentine soldiers hurriedly preparing for the Battle of Cascina after an impromptu dip in the river.
San Gallo's painting is an invaluable record of the lost work, but it doesn't give us much idea of the impact of the original, because I think it's fair to say that Michelangelo's Battle of Cascina is one of the great turning points of Western art. His contemporaries were electrified by the expressive power of these twisting nudes set in motion. And as always, we get a much better idea of what that must have seemed like from the sketches.
Flaubert talks about the painter who has to start always somewhere at the core of the body and the body grows and then diminishes, and it's almost like this pulsating organism. Well, I think that Michelangelo instinctively, right through his career, always was drawn to the solar plexus. So if you think of the Battle of Cascina in your wonderful collection, there it is. That impossible twist of the body, it's like he's talking about some hinge that is invisible, but somehow held within the body that is the thing that links the visible and the invisible, life and death or something. For me, the greatest inspiration that Michelangelo gives is that you can use the body as the physical equivalent for yearnings and otherwise unexpressible feelings that are imagined.
The Cascina study is so compellingly realistic that it's easy to overlook just how unnatural the twisted torso actually is. Also, the figures prominently projecting shoulder blades should by rights lie flat, since the arms are extended. Michelangelo's genius enables him to blend details taken from life with an abstract, idealized version of the pose. From rapid sketches to detailed drawings, he works and reworks the figure in a constant search for perfection.
For the next 60 years, the male nude was to be the focus of Michelangelo's artistic expression. And it's because of his desire to convey the inner state of the figure that he keeps refining and changing the poses of the model. In Michelangelo's work, the male nude is not just a thing of beauty in itself. It's always a way of investigating a spiritual and an emotional state.
In 1505, Michelangelo was summoned to Rome by Pope Julius II, the owner of the Apollo Belvedere. Raphael's later portrait of Julius, now in the National Gallery, depicts the pontiff careworn and sick, at a low point in his rule in 1511, when his aggressive policy to expel the French was going badly.
But the Pope that Michelangelo encountered in 1505 was very different. Energetic, warlike, famously bad-tempered, and above all determined to use the arts to stamp his personality on the Vatican. He pulled down the medieval Basilica of St. Peter's, replacing it with the classical facade that we all know, which was to be crowned 50 years later by Michelangelo's dome.
The dome would have to wait. Michelangelo didn't design it for decades, and he died before it was actually built. But what he did start, in 1508, was the decoration of the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. And the drawings tell the story of Michelangelo planning and carrying out the greatest commission of his life. We still have a poem he wrote, complaining about the hardship of the task, and beside it is a little caricature showing himself in the act of painting the ceiling. We see through the other surviving drawings how he prepared the figures for the ceiling.
When you look at the drawings, what other Sistine ceilings might we have had if he'd gone with some ideas rather than the ones he eventually opted for?
Where he starts off with a different system of architecture. But the drawings we then have are a very close and intense study of what we see on the ceiling now.